Joining me today over coffee at the Office Cafe in Brussels, Jan Zahradril, ECR Spitzencandidate. We speak about Salvini, Orban and the ECR's vision for the future of Europe. Thanks for joining us today over coffee. You have some numbers to resolve in the next legislature. You're losing the British MEPs because of Brexit. How are you going to square these numbers?
Well, if it happens, I believe that they will stay with us for a little longer. But the truth is that one day they leave, that's true. And my count is quite good, quite positive. I was watching polls of our individual member parties in the individual member states, and each of them is doing better than in 2014. So my count says that if it goes like it is now, we can fulfill that gap of 18 missing British MEPs from, let's say, our own resources. We will have more Poles, we will have more Czechs, we will have more Swedes, more other nationalities. So we can just fill it up with the current parties, and maybe, and it's very likely, we will be joined by some other parties. We could do even better.
You've been embracing Salvini in Italy. Vox is getting some flirtation from ECR currently as well. In the Netherlands, you have some interest there too. But are you comfortable being attractive to so many quasi-fascist organizations?
Oh, come on. No, that's not true.
But it's true that some
it's
of these
too
organizations...
It's too a strong word.
How are you going to extricate yourself from this narrative that ECR is moving to the right and moving to an aggressive, more radical right?
First of all, I have to deny completely those accusations from some, fascist roots of some of those parties. This is maybe a very distant past, and particularly in Italy, you can very hardly find any center-right or right-wing party that would not be connected with something in the past. But the current situation is completely different, and we are very much interested in having reformist parties, in having parties that really want to change the European Union. We are interested in anti-federalist parties. We are interested in parties that promote what we call multi-speed, multipolar, and maybe multi-currency European Union, and I hope that we can achieve that.
And how does the prospect of Mr. Salvini dominating the group appeal to you?
Well, Mr. Salvini hasn't applied yet, and it's upon his decision. I heard a lot of contradictory expressions or statements from his side. One day he says that he will establish his own group. Other day he says that he will join some other group. So I'm very uncertain about what Mr. Salvini is going to do.
ECR be his natural home within the parliament?
Yes, but look, ECR is here. It is well established, it is well structured, and it is alive, and it will be doing even better. What Mr. Salvini is going to do, it's completely his job.
And Mr. Orban, who's having a difficult time with the EPP, and some reports from your group also say that the natural home for Mr. Orban is with the ECR. Are you discussing this with him?
Well, we are trying to punch a little bit Mr. Orban, that's true, but at this moment he is a very well established in the EPP. Somehow established. I don't expect him to leave in a foreseeable future. But some surprise might happen, who knows?
And clearly you'll have calculated the prospect of Salvini coming on board, Vox from Spain, and the prospect of Orban as well. Where would that leave you in terms of numbers if that were to happen?
Well, if that happens, I believe we can be up to 100. I believe we can easily defend the third position, the position of the third largest group. Maybe we can think even higher.
It would seem not unreasonable to think that another part of the EPP could break away to go with ECR, just like the Conservative Party of the United Kingdom did before.
That might happen, yeah.
And you were involved in those negotiations and the creation of the ECR at the time when Cameron broke away as well. It was your party. So you have some heritage with this. How does this feel compared to 2009?
Well, it was a tough time in 2009 because no one believed until the very last minute that we would do that. And suddenly, when EPP guys started to recognize that conservatives and us are really going to leave, they went berserk. They became completely furious, and they were like, we are going to destroy you. And we had really bad media for 2 or 3 months, and they were like, you will not survive 1 month, then you will not survive 3 months, then you will not survive half a year, then maybe you survive 1 term, but then you are finished. We are here, we are finishing second
What was
term.
the key lessons you learned at that time? What made it work as a group? How did you survive?
Well, I believe that it was this strong persuasion, this strong feeling that we need to bring some new paradigm to the scheme of the European integration. Until 2009, it's been dominated by EPP and socialists, both more or less federalist groups, ever closer union, one size fits all and everything. And everyone who was against that was pretty marginal, rather extremist force. We came up as the only viable alternative made from mainstream parties, and that was a big revelation, and that scared them a little bit. And we are here, and we are to promote our agenda even further.
So your vision for Europe, what does it mean to be an ECR Spitzencandidate? What is your key message when you travel across Europe at the moment?
It's very simple. We are a common sense voice between 2 extremes. One extreme is, let's say, anti-EU radical who wants to destroy the EU or dismantle or leave. This is not our policy. The other extreme, however, is that arch-federalist prototype who wants to integrate everything, who wants to unify taxes, social policies, healthcare policies, pension policies, who wants to make qualified majority vote on almost everything, united and unified foreign policy and everything. We disagree with that as well. So common sense in between 2 extremes.
And as an example of that, which policies would you articulate as being the way forward? Single market?
Single market is the core. Single market and common rules for the single market. But we have to complete single market because it's still
Which we're still far from.
Yeah, we are.
Where would you focus first then? Where would you push in the next legislature to really improve the single market?
Well, look, this week or maybe next Strasbourg at the last session, we have this mobility package, and this is a very viable and very important contribution to completion of a single market when it comes to free movement of services. So that's a very concrete example. I would also opt very much for some energy security cooperation or energy union. Infrastructure is also important. As a Central and Eastern European politician, there is a big taste, big appetite amongst all those representatives from all those countries to go for some sort of energy security or energy union, and also for infrastructure.
Okay, on migration, where is ECR on migration for the next legislature?
We are very strict on that. No quota, no redistribution by European Commission. We believe that the right to grant asylum, to grant legal protection, to grant temporary or permanent settlement, or even citizenship, has to stay in hands of national governments and national parliaments and nation states. We wouldn't like to shift it up to the European Commission.
So how do you solve the migration crisis if there's no harmonization of any form?
Well, I believe that we should invest more to external borders protection. Instead of what Mr. Juncker says, when he says, I will employ 10,000 more people in Frontex, I say no. If you have funds, if you have money, please help Bulgaria, help Italy, help Spain to strengthen their national capacities, because they are better equipped and they better know the situation on site, and they can strengthen the external border protection. I understand that those countries are under extreme burden because they are border countries of the European Union, and that's the reason why we have to help them. But I would strongly disagree with any redistribution of migrants.
Okay, but that's only part of the migration process. The population growth in Africa in particular is going to accelerate. Europe is going to face greater pressures on the migration front then. Would you support an increase in budget from the European Union to help deal with that problem over the medium term?
Restructuring of the budget, yes.
How would you restructure the budget?
Well, we have to think about it in a longer perspective, which is this multi-annual financial framework. We have to think once again seriously about the reform of the CAP, of the Common Agricultural Policy, and we have to spend more money for overseas assistance to those countries that might threaten us by illegal migration.
Okay, other threats from abroad. You used to advise the Prime Minister of Czech Republic as well on foreign affairs. We see threats from Russia, we see threats from China at the moment. Where are you more concerned?
Well, I think that these are two separate stories. And sometimes China and Russia have a very divergent interest. As someone who comes from the Central and Eastern Europe, I'm definitely much more concerned about Russia, because Russia, once again, it seems, has renewed its neo-imperial appetite and is trying to influence situation in some particular countries, most notably in Baltic states, but also in other countries. And first and foremost, it is occupying a part of foreign country, Ukraine. So it broke the international law. So I'm much more concerned about Russia. I think we should be tough on Russia. I'm not shy
Not
to...
that I want to bring up Mr. Salvini again, but he'll be a real headache for you. He's very pro-Russia.
Again, Mr. Salvini is not part of our group still, and if he ever applies, I think that this might be a serious problem.
How would you manage that, hypothetically?
That's the question for the future. I think that our Polish friends, which will constitute a very substantial part of our group in the future, will be concerned as well. And I think that they will have a very strong say into this.
Okay, China and security 5G.
Yes, I take it. It's a serious issue. On the other hand, it's very apparent, it's very clear that the EU is not going to follow this very strict US approach towards China. Because...
Do you think it should?
Well, I don't think so. I think we should be more pragmatic because, you know, for US, China is first and foremost a geopolitical rival and economic and trade partner only after that. I think that in Europe, it's the contrary. I think we take China mostly as economic and trade partner and then only as a geopolitical threat. We have, in fact, no geopolitical line of clash with China. So I think that we should be careful, but we should be open, friendly, and correct at the same time.
Okay, on the Eurozone, where does ECR stand on Eurozone?
Well, Eurozone is Eurozone, but you have...
That's very true.
Yeah, but you have also countries that are not part of the Eurozone. So...
Multi-speed Europe.
Multi-speed Europe, multi-currency Europe.
Okay, and we don't know what's happening with Brexit exactly yet, but the lessons from Brexit, have you changed your view of the European Union as a consequence of viewing Europe through the lens of Brexit?
Not much. I believe that Brexit is bad news, particularly for us from Central and Eastern Europe, because it is going to change the political equilibrium on the continent, and it makes Germany and France, or Franco-German axis, much more powerful. And this is not always something we, receive as a good news in Central and Eastern Europe. And the other thing, or the other lesson we can learn from Brexit is that it's not that easy to leave the European Union.
Should it
some
be?
people, no, some people might think, because those people who play with Frexit or Dutchexit or Czechexit should think twice, because even if such a mighty country, such a big economy, and such a political power like United Kingdom has so big troubles with leaving of the European Union, what about much smaller countries?
Okay.
So I think this is a very thoughtful lesson to be learned.
Okay, finally, on climate, would you describe yourself as a climate change denier?
No.
You supported some pretty extreme views in terms of questions.
No, that's not true. Look, funny thing, very few people know about it, that I am environmentalist by profession. I have a master's degree from environmental sciences and water technologies. So what I say is that everything what we do should be based on science and not on the ideology, but a real science, not a junk science.
So what's your view of the climate change condition? How do we get here and how do we solve this problem?
Well, I think that climate change is happening. There is no doubt about that. It has multiple causes. One cause is man-made, one cause is non-man-made. What we can do is to try to influence those man-made causes, but in such a way, in such a manner that will not undermine our very economic fundamentals in Europe. Because it would be very stupid then our industries and manufacturing would outsource its production to some other countries outside of Europe, and we would stay just, naked.
So you would support a much deeper investment in green tech to be able to change Europe's economy this way?
In technologies and innovations. I believe that we should stick with the Paris Climate Agreement. Once we subscribe to that, we are committed to it, well, we shouldn't go any further.
Jens Edril, thank you so much.
Thank you, my pleasure.